Welcome to the Wandering Dotterill. Living vicariously through our unhealed trauma causes problems. It causes bad behaviors. It causes us to be attached to those who are unhealed, who also have trauma, creating trauma bonds along the way. And some of us have a giant plateau or a Mount Everest of trauma bonds, and we don't even know it. We're bonded to someone because we think we love them, but it's actually trauma, and it's unhealthy, and it's time to wake up. Take it from someone who knows. It took me a long time to educate myself on the concept of narcissism and toxic cycles and toxic behavior. Back in the day, the word was you're a jerk. You're just a beep hole. You're only thinking of yourself. You don't think of anyone else. When you're down and the person is abusing you, or they've put their hands on you, or they've taken advantage of you, your physical body.
What?
In a relationship, intimate partner violence happens, but for me, I just thought it was normal for years because that's the way I was raised. I was raised to believe that there were those people controlling my life and their little voices in my head were steering me in the direction I should go, even though it was wrong. It took me years to break those cycles. It took me years to stop saying yes to bad marriages, stop saying yes to bad partners, stop saying yes to bad friends, stop saying yes to negative remarks, and just walking with it and absorbing that into my life, and then trying to live my life in a way where I could earn money or get an education, which I finally did. I invested in myself, and people didn't like it. My family didn't like it. They didn't like me investing in a home for my children. They didn't like me going to school full time. There were those in my family that put up the wall of, well, so-and-so did this and graduated like this, and now they have this much money and that job and that car and that family, and look at you. You haven't done anything but wear a dress. And I did. I wore a dress for 15 years, working labor-intensive jobs while people laughed at me because I was conditioned to think I had to be a specific way. Being a pastor's kid and being around narcissists and not understanding I had control of my own destiny, I thought I should try to look the part, be a woman, and go and chop a tree down wearing a dress.
What?
Or go and run a rototiller wearing a dress. Or clean someone's yard, raking leaves and getting dirty wearing a dress. I literally had people come up to me and offer me their pants. And it was so demeaning because, one, they didn't understand what was going on in my mind. Two, they didn't understand the way I was raised. Three, I had no self-esteem. I didn't lift my head up and say, I'm worth it. I didn't look at them and say, this is how it is. I just bowed my head down and went back to my job because I needed to earn that money to take care of myself, which I wasn't taking care of myself until I got older, until I learned that by breaking those toxic cycles in my life was going to save me. And my faith, which I lean on Jesus now. I don't lean on everybody else's toxicity. I don't lean on everybody else's way they think I should dress or look or behave, or I should speak a certain way because that's what they want me to do. But that's what I did for years. The other thing I've learned is holding a level of maturity, not being sucked into drama, trauma, and other people's melodrama when it's not real. When you've gone through real abuse and real toxicity and real trauma and real toxic cycles, you'll understand the difference. And what I'm trying to say is, for years I allowed bad actors in my life to control me, to hurt my feelings, to say horrible things about me. And you look back at those situations and say, well, if I would have handled it this way, they would have stopped. But you can't stop a narcissist or an abusive person or someone who's been conditioned to treat people that way because they have the upper hand or because they're in a position to do so. Take, for instance, the time that I left a relationship and someone in my family jumped into a relationship with that person.
What?
And they ended up being an item which hurt all of the children and hurt me extensively, but they had been doing it all along. And so it took me years to find out that they had already done this over and over again, not because I wasn't paying attention, but because I had shifted my focus to thinking this is the way it should be. These are people that are controlling me and my environment, and my outcome is their desire. It's a weird way to say it, but what I'm trying to say is that they trained me to be submissive and be quiet and take the punishment, take the pain, take the trauma, take the drama, and it was my fault. And the person that's being traumatized, the person that's been conditioned to pain and trauma and abuse and neglect, feels that they are at fault for someone else's behavior. They take all the pain onto themselves as a scapegoat. And so for my entire life, even into my adulthood, I allowed individuals to play the role of my guardian, my protector, my shining knight, the knight in shining armor syndrome, when it's not even really happening. You're just always looking out into the future, hoping that your savior will come. And it doesn't happen that way. And abused people that have been through trauma and toxicity, that have been conditioned to think, because they're the scapegoat, to think that it's okay, that these behaviors are just life, this is just how it goes, then you don't break the cycle, you continue to live in a bubble. You walk around with your head somewhere else. It's not in the clouds, believe me. And believe me, it doesn't feel good to be in a trauma bubble, to be walking around in trauma. I had an experience one day when I was trying to break free from toxic cycles and narcissistic abuse, and I walked into the college campus and had a whiteout moment, a complete whiteout. It was like I was having a vision of fog, and I was completely in shock. I couldn't see, I couldn't think, I couldn't speak, I was frozen, and I kept walking. And if this has ever happened to you, if you're having a panic attack like I was, I just kept walking. You have to keep walking. You have to keep walking it out until these things stop. And you have to change your physiology. You have to change your body into a healthy body. You have to get your thoughts right and your mind right. But I walked into the college and had this whiteout experience. And the only person I could think of was the college counselor. And I hadn't told anyone. I had never told anyone what was going on with me. I never had told anyone about abuse or cycles of violence or the way I was raised. And I just walked into the counselor's office and interrupted everything she was doing and sat down and said, I don't know what to do. This is happening. And she knew exactly what was going on. She told me what was going on. She told me to go home, take a break, and relax, and just breathe, and do what I needed to do to take care of myself. And that's when the door of self-help and self-awareness And self-care became evident that I was not doing any self-care. And that went on for 30 some odd years. And so that going on for 30 plus years of my life, from the time I was born until in my 30s, I still hadn't even reached the awareness level I needed to break free from toxic cycles. That took many more years, many more failures, many more bad relationships, many more abusive situations, even from family members, scapegoating me, pointing their fingers at me, saying, "You're crazy, you've done this, you've done that." When all in all, I was just unhealthy. I was unhealthy. I wasn't dealing with my problems. I wasn't learning how to take care of myself. I was walking around in a fog all the time, not knowing how to fix it, and being addicted in an addiction cycle with myself, and having suicidal thoughts and mania and unstable thoughts, unstable relationships. And they, that's what they say. They say you emit from your person what you've been through, what you know, what your knowledge is, what your wisdom is. And what I was giving others was bad behavior, exactly what they said I would do. I gave them what they wanted. I gave them bad behavior, bad responses, or I would just shut down, which was my go-to, was shutting down and then taking it out on myself for years. This is your host, the Dingy Dotterel. There's this old adage I've heard many times over. I've heard it from my parents. I've heard it from people their age that say, "Oh, you did this, you made your bed, now you go lie in it." But the problem with that concept is the fact that if we don't recognize who we are and where we came from, it's always going to be like that. It's your fault for doing what you did, now lie in it. But if you came from a home with substance abuse, violence, addiction, narcissism, control, lack of medical care, food insecurity, body shaming, bullying, harmful, toxic behaviors, you will be harmful and toxic. It's a fact. I know it is, because I was harmful and toxic to others for most of my life, until I realized I needed to backtrack a minute, and I needed to reassess what I knew, what I learned in going to college, what I learned going to university. What I learned, what they were trying to tell me was, when you focus on the toxicity and what people say, you're going to be toxic. And you're going to act like what they expect you to. So the change up is dealing with my own behavior, making myself accountable for my own behavior, because I can only be in control of my own behavior. I can't control what everybody else did to me when I was little. I can't control what weirdos did to me when I was little. I can't control or save the predators in my life without first acknowledging the behavior even happened. I can't help them understand what they put me through if I don't even understand what I went through. So it's not hindsight. You can't stand there and say, "This happened to me and it's all somebody else's fault." I learned the behavior, it was modeled to me, and my responsibility is to me, not to everyone else. I've even had people say to me, "You knew better, so why'd you do it?" And that was after being a resource liaison for about 9 years. I did outreach to women that had been in situations where they were needing resources in the community. And the creation of that was from my own trauma from my own life, from my own past. But I still hadn't told anyone. I hadn't developed enough wisdom, and I'm not talking about book learning. I hadn't developed myself. I was trying to reinvent myself, yes, but it wasn't working because I was still stuck in that trauma bubble. I had trauma bonds with multiple people, which is where you go through some type of trauma with that person. Either they abuse you and you're connected to them and they shift the blame on you and say it's your fault that I did this to you, or you've been seriously injured with a head injury, which happened to me multiple times. One being hit by a car, stung by bees, bitten by swarms of ticks, being in multiple car accidents, being in violent relationships, and being an addict. You could say, I'm fortunate to be alive. Yes, but I wasn't living. I wasn't living my best life. I wasn't able to walk out my door for fear that someone was going to look at me and know that I was in a trauma bubble, because you get stuck in your own mind. And so I'm saying, when you're trying to reinvent yourself, self-care is the best first step. You have to get healthy. You have to educate yourself. You have to get knowledgeable about the facts, about the fact that if you stay in a relationship where there is intimate partner violence, and 7 of those instances have happened and occurred and you haven't left, the statistics are so high that the individual that is being abused will not live.
Huh?
And it happened to me more than 7 times. And it started when I was a kid. It happened to me every single year of my life. Like clockwork, over and over again. And I didn't know any statistics. I didn't know that I had beaten the statistics over and over, because I was a runaway, because I hitchhiked, because I took rides from strangers, because I had been held at gunpoint and also shot.
What?
And hurt by family members and shifted from house to house and around predators, around people that were doing things to me that were unacceptable. And I thought that those things were normal. And so I didn't realize I had beaten those statistics until much later in my awareness journey. And I'm still on that awareness journey. There is no definitive key or answer to traumatic experiences, to a traumatic past, to a traumatic childhood, or to abusive relationships. There is no key on how to heal. You can find the information and the people that talk and say, this is the way you do it, this is what's best for you. But the best thing to do is to do what's best for you, to heal in the best way you know how possible. For some of us, that's isolation and reading books and listening to podcasts and diving deep with others that have been through trauma. And sometimes that triggers trauma. I have found myself personally, I've been triggered by other people's trauma. And when I hear my own stories, I'm triggered tremendously. So put that into perspective. I'm speaking on a podcast to a bunch of strangers, and I turn the podcast on to edit or listen to my own story, and I end up crying. I end up thinking how horrible that is, or how horrible that sounds, or I know the truth of it. I'm only giving you guys the little snippets. I'm not giving you the real meat yet, because it's so triggering to me. And I found that when I wrote my first book on my experience of being a pastor's kid and the Christian experience, A Paradox. It was a paradox for me, how I was abused, how I was traumatized by people that said they were people of God. And I had to dig deep into how I was traumatized by people of God, how they said that they loved God and Jesus, but they would abuse me and they would blame me and they would blame shift me or lie about a situation that happened 45 years ago and try to hold me accountable while shaming me and making me feel small because they hadn't dealt with their own issues. And so that runs rampant in today's journey of self-help, self-healing. I have the key to your problem. This is what you need to do. And that's not what I've understood through this whole journey. I understood that going to a counselor meant speaking just enough to get their services for me to take a break from my trauma. And I wasn't even talking to them about my trauma for years. Going to intense counseling, I found that I could talk, speak, and act like I was healing, but I was more traumatized because I wasn't speaking the reality of my situation. I wasn't actually speaking life into my life. I wasn't being an active participant in my own healing. If I were to give you an example of what my life was looking like to me, or what it looked like to me then compared to now, it's me looking backwards on my life. And you know how some of those animals, they'll smell food and they gag, and then they eat the food after they smell it, after they've gagged? My life was like the gag. I wasn't living a good, healthy life. I was allowing those bad actors to influence me and to influence my decisions by using their narcissistic, toxic tactics, which I thought were normal. And it took me a big wake-up call during the pandemic when I saved someone's life during a narcotics suicide attempt. It was absolutely terrible. It was absolutely scary. And they were unappreciative. They were demeaning. They were rude. They were using me for their own gain, and it was sick. But I've had to go through certain experiences multiple times in order for me to learn that life doesn't have to be that way. We don't have to stay stuck. And if we're digging deep into a spiritual issue, such as narcissism, toxicity, and abusive relationships, one of the things I've struggled with in Western culture is self. We've learned to be self-absorbed. We've learned to be in our phone, taking selfies and posting everything about our lives in the open that's not real, because we use filters, we use fakeness. And I've struggled with being real my whole life, really knowing who I was, being healthy, being happy, being okay in my own body, not allowing other people to shame me or feel like I was being shamed when I'm out in public because I don't have long fingernails or perfect hair or the perfect body. I never did anyway, so what difference does it make now? What difference it makes now is how I feel about myself, not what other people think of me or what they've thought about me. I've had to deal with this my whole life, and it's a raw fact. It sickens me because people were fake back in the day. They wore big, poofy wigs with perfect makeup, and they didn't worry if you were thick or thin. They worried about what kind of car you drove and what kind of alcohol you drank or what kind of pill you were popping. And it wore me out. It wore me out with my parents being that way. And they were completely attached to their belongings after they were raised around their parents that went through a lot of hardship, people became attached to their, and understanding where my parents were modeling the behavior of their parents, my grandparents, or the predecessors of the time, where people went through the Great Depression and loss and war. They became attached to their stuff. And then we march into nowadays with people stuck in their phones. And I get so frustrated with people acting like their stuff is what makes the world go round. So the point I was trying to make was, someone like me, a female like me, there are those of us that have similar experiences, and trying to fit in today's world, having the newest best car, the newest best boyfriend, or the wonderful husband from down the lane might not be the fit we need for becoming healthy, to follow the standard, to live like so-and-so, to keep up with the Joneses. We have to work on ourselves and get healthy before we can even have a healthy relationship. It's not about status and the kind of car you drive. Might be nice to have a new car, but for those of us who have struggled to eke out an existence on this planet, some of us have never even driven a new car, let alone sit in a new car. Thanks for listening. If you appreciate the content, please share. Thanks, Spotify. Welcome to the Wandering Dotterel.